Hello, my name is Leo, and over here we have
Delray.
Delaware. Where are you from?
I'm from Stockton, so I'm like pretty nearby to Davis.
Okay, yeah, that's close. And I wanted to ask you what member of a sub community are you a member of?
Yeah, so I'm Black and queer. I'm a member of the airways community and the genderqueer community.
So then I wanted to move on to, is there like intergroup ostracization? Like, is there like the LGBTQ plus community, like, are there some people that like, is there in-group like fighting, or like, is there in-group like, oh, you're not worthy of like being a member of this community? And then more so in the Black queer community as like a subsect, is there like a threshold of acceptance to like being a member of the Black queer community? Like, are there some people that think like they're more Black and queer? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you could just walk me through that.
Yeah, I would definitely say there's multiple layers to it. It's also kind of part of what I'm doing my personal research on.
Awesome.
But I would say there's like multi-layer ostracization. So like in the LGBTQ like community, like we already talked about it, but like Black people being excluded. But there's certain like identities within that that are more excluded. So like Black trans people face a lot of discrimination, face a lot of like ostracization of being like. I mean, also just like the trans community in general, but especially like Black trans people, they're seen as like, we don't want you here, or like transphobia is very
like within the trans community or within the Black community?
Within both.
Okay.
So like being Black and trans, it's like from a trans perspective, like we don't want you here because you're Black. Or
wow, and you wouldn't think that, because usually the trans communities seem to be like they're putting out that like of acceptance, like they're putting out that as such a main messaging.
Yeah, and it's very much like group like inner workings where it's not something that you would see like publicly, but once you enter that like community space, it's maybe not the most apparent, but it's in the form of like microaggressions or just like small forms of exclusion, like Black trans erasure and stuff like that, of like police brutality against Black people. You don't see a lot of Black trans people in the media. You see mostly Black men, or if ever you do see like Black women, but Black trans people are not something that you see very much as getting media exposure when something happens to them, even though it happens at similar, sometimes greater rates. So there's that. And then also, within like Black queer community, I would say yes, also because of like, there's certain queer identities that are seen as more, like you were saying, like more worthy. So those would be like gay, bi, lesbian. Are the ones that are just the more generally accepted, like, oh, you're a part of the LGBTQI.
Do you think because it fits into this like this norm that we have on the mainstream society, like, do you think it's just that some of the other subsects are just like more like deviant in a sense, or just like less understood, that's why like they're like less accepted, like they're just harder to wrap your head around kind of deal?
Yeah, definitely, because when you hear queer or you hear like LGBTQIA+, the first thing that people think is like, oh, equal marriage rights, or like having partnerships like available to you. But nobody's thinking about like, oh, I'm Black and I'm intersex. Nobody's talking about like the gender aspect. I'm Black and I'm trans. I'm Black and I'm genderqueer. Or nobody's talking about the people that are part of the aromantic or the asexual communities. They're like, how are you queer when you don't even want to engage in these activities? It's like this kind of, you're in this limbo of like, I don't want to be part of the like societal norm of like, oh, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get a partner, I'm going to date, I'm going to have children, all this other stuff. But you're not accepted in the queer community because they don't see you as being able to love in the same way. And it's not that we can't or that we don't, but this whole thing of like society, especially American society, placing romantic relationships or even just like sexual relationships above friendships, other forms of partnerships, like queer platonic relationships. People are like, what's the difference between a QPR and just having a friend? It's a very different level of having this person-to-person intimacy, but it's not on the same level of being romantic.
Right.
And it's just very much of, if you're part of these communities, even in the Black queer community, it's just seen as you're not different in the same way, so you're still an other.
I see. What does participation look like in the Black queer community? Like, what are some like methods that you guys use to like identify yourselves to the public and like amongst yourself? Like, what do you like what are some things you do for the group itself, like for the movement?
For me, I have tried to like put myself out there and join I kind of mentioned earlier join campus organizations, but I haven't really seen anything that personally speaks to me, at least here in Davis.
Right.
I know that there's a lot of Black career groups that will form.
Okay.
They'll do earlier we talked about online forums. That's
Right.
something that's a really big thing. I'm reading a book right now where she's kind of talking about the author is Sharonda Brown, and the book is called Refusing Compulsory Sexuality.
Okay.
And a lot of that book is talking about her journey of not only just figuring out that she's asexual, but having to combat the stereotypes that are seen by Black people as being hypersexual. And so
that's really interesting.
Yeah, so she's using her work to, I guess, not only look at her own experiences of being excluded, erased, ostracized, and all this other stuff, but also using that as a platform to look to other people that are in the Black queer community and learn more about their experiences. But a lot of what I'm seeing of building community has been forming community groups, especially online. I haven't seen anything, and maybe this is just me not being a very extroverted person, but I haven't seen anything that's very outwardly oh, we have a club, or oh, we have this and that. Because even if there is a club, it gets disbanded because there's not enough members. Or even if there's an online space, it gets disbanded because there's not enough members.
Do you think an issue is also absorption into there's kind of this erasure of we are Black and queer? Do you think there's this kind of absorption of oh, you're just LGBTQI plus, come here, join this group? Do you think there's some of that erasure in that sense of your own unique group? Do you think there's some unwanted absorption into the broader queer community?
I can definitely see that, or not even just absorption, but assimilation of feeling I don't have, because I see those as being two different things of a group telling you to come over because it's oh, I see that your group is small, we have a big group, and you can have more of an impact. But then there's the other side of things where it's oh, I'm from a small community, we're not able to really maintain a presence if we just have 4 or 5 people that are physically in this vicinity, unless we just move to just being an online space. So just that feeling of I'm not going to get any recognition unless I become part of this larger space, but then you become part of the larger space and you're not getting that recognition in the same way. I definitely do see stuff like that happening.
So last thing I wanted to ask you, what does the community give to you? What does the Black queer community give you?
I would say I had only recently realized that I was Black and queer. A lot of my high school life was well, I'm pretty sure I'm straight, but I'm just not thinking about relationships right now. And then I come into college, and the concept of asexuality didn't really resonate with me until I had heard that just a bunch of people around me just immediately started getting into hookups and all these other relationship types, and that doesn't sound like something, not just that I don't want to do right now, I'll think about it after my studies, but it just doesn't sound like something I ever want to be a part of. And so I had this kind of period in my life where I was grappling with what's the point of me being alive if I don't get to be a person in the same way that these other people are guaranteed personhood, where a lot of what American society is saying what I should strive for is not something that I want to do. What can I do with my life if not that? And so I think what a lot of the Black queer community gives me is just this kind of reassurance that I don't need to subscribe to this this social norm of I need to do bam, 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 bam in order to be accepted within society. Not even that I don't have to do it in the same way, but that I don't have to do any of it at all, and that I can still exist as a person, and that's a fine thing. And so I guess it really has impacted my self-worth of being able to recognize that I'm not any less of a person for being a part of these communities, because there was definitely a point where I was I really wish I wasn't queer. I wish I wasn't genderqueer. I wish I was just the same as everybody else, because then I don't have to think about this, because nobody else has to think about it in the same way that I have to think about it with all of the ways that I'm intersectional. I'm Black, Mexican, white, Filipino. I have all these different queer identities, and I can't interact with culture, I can't interact with gender, I can't interact with sexuality in the same way that a lot of people can. And so I feel being part of Black queer community has really allowed me to have a space where I feel I can exist in some capacity without having to, I guess, assimilate.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to enlighten me and just kind of what that culture looks like. Thank you, Delray.
Yeah, definitely. Props to you.